The mainstream narratives in both the Western world and China paint the Cultural Revolution as a period of 10 wasted years and setback, implying that nothing was achieved during those years. However, that idea is objectively false, as the Cultural Revolution, in reality, produced high levels of economic growth and began making technical advances which were crucial for China to catch up with the industrialized countries. On screen are statistics of Chinese growth during the period. Most years saw positive economic growth, with disruptions in both 1967 and 1968, which were the most violent years of the Cultural Revolution. However, 1969 and 1970 produced extremely high levels of growth, with the 1970s level being the second highest in the history of the People's Republic, behind the 1958 levels. Growth was higher than both India and the United States during this time, India being a country which started with similar conditions but pursued capitalism, and the United States being the largest economic power. During the end of the Cultural Revolution, industrial output had also doubled its 1965 levels, growing faster than agriculture, and began to lay the foundations of China's economic takeoff. In 1964, China had detonated its first nuclear weapon, which was developed with initial help from the Soviet Union prior to the Sino-Soviet split. 32 months later, in 1967, China then successfully detonated its first thermonuclear weapon, being the fourth country to possess a hydrogen bomb. This was achieved independently of Soviet aid, which was crucial for China's first nuclear weapon, and was the fastest transition from nuclear fission to nuclear fusion in history. While the goal was to produce a weapon with a yield of 1 megaton, Test 6's maximum yield was 3.3 megatons, slightly higher than the UK's most powerful test. The ability to produce the hydrogen bomb evidently shows China's capabilities in nuclear physics, which is even more impressive considering the time it took and being an uneducated feudal backwater just 18 years prior. In 1965, development began to produce both ICBMs and launch rockets. The DF-4 ballistic missile, which has a nominal range of 5,500 kilometers and could carry a 2190 kilograms nuclear warhead, was developed by the 1970s and deployed in 1975. The DF-5 ballistic missile, which has a range of 12 to 15,000 kilometers, was developed and tested in 1971 and deployed in 1981. Both models continue to be in use by the PLA today. At the same time, the DF-4 was modified to develop the Long March 1 rocket, which was used to launch satellites into orbit. The Long March 2 was developed from the DF-5 and was first launched successfully in 1975 after various modifications. The Dongfang Hongyuhao satellite was launched on the 24th of April 1970 by the previously mentioned Long March 1 rocket. With its launch, China became the fifth country to independently launch a satellite into orbit. It weighed 173 kilograms, had a diameter of about 1 m, and had a radio transmitter which was used to broadcast "The East is Red." It remained in contact for 20 days before losing transmission, a vast improvement over the French and Japanese satellites which lasted less than 4 days. The success of Dongfang Hongyuhao led China to expand on space technology, including the Shijian series of satellites. The first one was launched just under a year later, which operated for 8 years. Its task was to make long-term tests of a satellite's basic technology and systems. Throughout the 1960s and 70s after the Chinese famine, scientist Yuan Longping and others began working on hybridizing rice, which would produce higher yields, as well as methods to reproduce it. In 1973, Yuan and his comrades established a complete process for the creation and reproduction of high-yield hybrid rice. The next year, they successfully cultivated the rice, which yielded 20% more per unit than common rice breeds. As a result, China had the highest rice production worldwide, and Yuan Longping's hybrid rice had been growing in dozens of countries in the Third World. The Type 091 submarine is the first nuclear-powered submarine employed by the PLA and the first indigenously produced model of nuclear-powered attack submarines in Asia. It was given approval to start in 1958 by Chairman Mao Zedong, with Peng Shilou as the first chief designer. The Type 091 submarine was finished by 1970 and tested on the 26th of December 1970. It was then commissioned into the PLA Navy on the 1st of August, 1974, where it is still in use today.